Okay, so it's 3:02 now. I think that's a good time for me to give an introduction to our speaker. First, I guess I should say that you're here at an event of Maine Contemporary Archives. We're a group of librarians and archivists who are interested in preserving experiences of current events in Maine. And somebody had the wonderful idea of inviting someone to represent an effort called ROPA, Roadmap for Participatory Archiving. So we are going to hear about ROPA from Dr. Carolyn Goldstein. And Carolyn, I told you that you could introduce yourself, so I will just let you take it away. We're very excited that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us.
So yeah, I think I'll introduce myself as part of my presentation, but is Kathy going to talk first? Or should I have her?
Not that I was aware of.
Okay, so I want to welcome, say thank you. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm excited to see Kathy because she was a member of the core team of ROPA, which I'll be talking about. I'm excited to see all of you here too, and to share ROPA with you and see how it might be able to be used as a tool by you and your colleagues in the projects you're already working on or the ones you're planning. I'm going to share my screen. And move into slideshow. So yeah, can you all see my screen? Yeah. Okay. So this is me. I'm at UMass Boston in Boston, Mass. I work as part of the University Archives and Special Collections in the Healy Library, which is our university library. Our agenda for today is to do a welcome, identify some learning objectives, introduce and define participatory archiving, talk about the Mass Memories Roadshow, give all of you a chance to share what brings you here today and what you're hoping to get out of it. Then I'll provide an overview of ROPA, and we'll also have a chance to share your projects, and I'll highlight some of the best practice examples that can be found throughout ROPA, and then we'll have some questions maybe this time. So what I'm hoping to convey to you today is to have you come away with a good definition of participatory archiving and a sense of what that process involves. Have everybody have an opportunity to identify opportunities for personal and professional development to meet the challenges involved in this work. Also identify the resources and steps that you need to have a successful in-person participatory archiving event and build a collection from it. And finally, understand the considerations for defining community and articulating the stories you hope to collect. So what is participatory archiving? It's a very broad term and one that's relatively new and used to describe activities, though, that have been underway and for quite a long time. For the purposes of today and ROPA, we're specifically talking about archival initiatives that originate from institutions, libraries, museums, etc., and that include significant participation, archival participation from the individuals and communities that the archival records are created by or are about. So this goes beyond initial record donation to an institution. With participatory archiving initiatives, cultural heritage professionals and community members are coming together and sharing authority in the work of deciding what should be collected, appraising, and describing archival materials. Participants choose what records are to be preserved, and their descriptions of these items are often used in the item records and finding aids that are created. There's also a lot of talk these days about community archives, and we see participatory archiving as related to that but distinct from it. Whereas participatory archive is a collaborative practice that involves institution-based professionals working together with community members. Community archives really are independent initiatives. So as I think many of you already know and have experience with, there are two main ways that collections like these get built. One, through in-person collection day events, and secondly, through online portals where people can contribute. And I have here just a couple examples. One is the History Harvest program that was launched by the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and has been used by a number of universities in conjunction with history undergraduate student projects. And another is maybe less well known for those of you in this area is Harvey Memories Project, created by a number of institutions in Texas to document Hurricane Harvey in 2017. And there are many more, as I'm sure you know. So the Mass Memories Roadshow is the program that I manage at UMass Boston, and it's I want to describe it a little bit for you here, so you have a sense of where I'm coming from and the experience that I'm drawing on as I sort of launch into talking about ROPA. The Roadshow was established in 2004 by my colleague Joanne Wiley. Joanne was working on the Mass Studies project at UMass Boston, and she was developing state and local history curriculum, looking for photographs and other documents that would support education about the more recent past and the changing demographics in Massachusetts. And she was finding it just very, very hard to find. She found it was difficult to find these types of things in existing repositories. So she began organizing events where individuals could bring family photos to be added to a searchable website. She wasn't even thinking of it as an archive at all. And then eventually, in 2010, the program found a home in the department where I am now, University Archives and Special Collections in the Healy Library. And a few years later, we migrated the collection to a Content DM online repository platform. So I want to say a few things about what kind of a participatory archiving program the Roadshow is. It's event-based, and we partner with communities in Massachusetts by application, producing about 4 events per year. The application process allows us to understand our partner communities and to establish expectations about our team's responsibilities and those of the local planning teams. Over the years, we've developed a clear division of labor and a cost-sharing model. UMass Boston guides the planning process, provides equipment and volunteer training, and takes responsibility for processing and preserving the collection, as well as making it accessible. We also bring a group of roadies who are experienced volunteers to lead and staff the stations. And our community partners are in charge of providing the location, a group of volunteers, as well as launching a dedicated outreach and publicity effort to ensure a well-attended event that is representative of the community or theme that's at hand. So at our events, we prioritize the perspectives of community members. Contributors choose what materials to bring, and we invite them to describe their items in their own words and why they are important to them. In addition to collecting photographs, we offer a video station for recording short interviews and a keepsake station where contributors can be photographed with their items. We have a preservation station where we provide resources about how best to take care of family treasures. And community historians and archivists share resources from area repositories and museums at a local history station. Altogether, these stations make up a sort of an open house format where participants can engage and exchange perspectives and learn from one another about shared community histories. We organize 2 types of events. Most of the events we do are connected to a city or town in Massachusetts. Others are connected to a specific theme related to the state, such as World War II or Irish immigration or hip hop culture. So far, we've partnered with about 4 dozen communities and collected more than 12,000 items, photos, stories, and videos, which are available at openarchives.umb.edu. So everybody here is likely to be familiar with various components of a participatory archiving process or program. What's unique and important about this kind of work is that it brings together a lot of aspects of library and cultural heritage work that are often thought of as separate or unconnected. We've learned through our experience with the Roadshow that there are really 3 general and broad components of participatory archiving: activities focused on understanding and building community, activities involved in event planning and logistics, and then the work and activities and tasks related to collection building and preservation. So when we have a bit more in-depth discussion of ROPA in a little while, you'll see that we use this framework to design the platform. But before that, I'd like to learn a little bit more about you and what brings you here today. So I don't know how many people have arrived by now, 23, but if you wouldn't mind just sort of quickly saying your name and what institution you're in, any connection you have to participatory archiving. And then I have a little poll using Jill's fancy tool that you can participate in to answer the second 2 questions. But let's just start by giving people a chance to introduce themselves in the chat while I pull up the polling tool. So just, who you are and what, go here, what your connection is or interest is in participatory archiving. And then I'm going to copy this link, put it in the chat. Sorry. Here is the poll link. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, and then I'm going to present the poll. Thank you. I'm going to try to multitask massively while reading about who you are and also talking. Who's good at that? So I'm curious to know about who's already done some virtual collecting. Looks like there's a lot of yeses here. Then also, are you able to, there's a second question in there, just giving me a sense of what aspects of participatory archiving you have experience with, so I can have just a sense of where you might be, what you might be wanting to learn more about. Then I think we're going to be able to see the results if we do that. Has everyone participated? No, not yet. Okay, give you more time. Take your time. We can continue to get more results.
Sorry, how do we access the poll? We didn't see it.
Oh, sorry. I put it in the chat along with all the other things.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I'll put it again.
Okay.
So you're don't look at,
did.
It's the shorter link, and don't look at the big link yet. I'll put it back in once everybody's participated.
Experience in community cooperation.
And then that gives me time to read about you.
Yeah.
So you're from all around Maine. Is everybody here from Maine? Anybody here not from Maine? Thank you for being here. All right. Now can I share the results? All right, I'm going to put the results link in this here and see what we got. So most people here did some virtual collecting during the pandemic. And some did not. And then it sounds like there's a lot of experience in the room here with digital collections, and then a little bit less so with the other aspects, community collaboration, event logistics, digital preservation, and interpretation. But we've got some experience in all these realms, which is great. I guess I hope I won't be too repetitive or telling people more than anything they don't, things they don't already know. I'm going to now go to back to my presentation. And thanks for sharing about who you are. So I'm going to say just a few things about what ROPA is and kind of how we got into it in the first place. And I will give you a chance, Kathy, maybe to chime in and give your perspective on the project. So first off, last year, a little more than a year ago, our archives launched ROPA, which is the roadmap for participatory archiving. And it's supported in part by a national leadership grant from the IMLS, Institute of Museum and Library Services. So what is it? It's an online resource designed to guide libraries and cultural organizations through the process of collaborating with community members to plan participatory archiving events and create digital collections. And the goal of ROPA is ultimately to meet users where they are, whether they're part of large academic institutions or volunteer-run community archives. First and foremost, ROPA is inspired by the success of the Roadshow, and over the years we were contacted by individuals from around the country who were interested in hosting participatory archiving events of their own, helped us to understand increasing interest in this kind of work. And additionally, we had been steadily honing and strengthening our own program. And we had hosted a fellow from the National Digital Stewardship Residency Program to help us strengthen the digital preservation activities of our program. We also conducted a survey of communities in Massachusetts with whom we partnered, and it helped us to see gaps in our own program, particularly with regards to assisting communities interested in sharing and interpreting the collection that resulted from their event. And then we also had a grant from the NEH that enabled us to do a hip hop themed roadshow, which proved to be a transformative experience for our program in general. But ultimately, our efforts to address this growing demand really started more methodically in 2018 when we received a Lyricist Catalyst Fund grant that supported two things: the production of a video that describes our program and the development of online training materials for volunteers and community members working at our events. And it was while working on that project that we realized that we wanted to create not only a resource that would inspire others to engage in participatory archiving, but also one that would help users overcome the unique challenges of this kind of work, such as planning for inclusive community engagement and working through the technical hurdles of digital repositories and preservation. And this led us to apply for the grant, the IMLS grant that funded ROPA. Oh, whoops, sorry. So from the very start of the grant period, we worked on building a core team that comprised of leaders in participatory archiving field, including Kathy, who's here today, to inform development and practices on all aspects of what would become ROPA. And the members of our team included not only Kathy from the Maine Historical Society, but also representatives from the Metropolitan New York Library Council in New York City, the New York Public Library, Massachusetts Archives, La Mesa History Center in California, the Boston Public Library, and San Jose State University in California. Over the grant period, we also developed a list of more than 150 people from around the country who could serve as reviewers at various stages of a design and development project. So early on, we focused on understanding the breadth of what falls under the umbrella of participatory archiving. And we conducted a survey, a nationwide survey in 2019. And the link to that is there in the slide. And what we found there was that the survey results captured the knowledge, attitudes, and practices of libraries and other cultural organizations with experience hosting participatory archiving events and those that were just exploring the idea. In addition to revealing that there's a great deal of interest in this kind of work across the country, the survey results also showed that different users had differing needs for an online resource of this type. And as a result, we went through an iterative development process and designed ROPA to be an accessible, adaptable resource that would guide both specialized professionals and novice volunteers through all steps of the process. In the end, and as a direct result of our research and survey work, we organized ROPA into 3 key sections and by module to allow users to find the guidance they need and connect it to their own expertise and experience. And while I pull the website up, I really would like to invite Kathy to sort of chime in now and sort of say a thing about that core team and work together. And anything else she wants to share?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I mean it was a great collaborative thing. We met oh gosh, it was like monthly for a while, and just kind of hammered everything out, and then we divided up into what our sort of core expertise sections were. And I guess what mine I would want to say was more access, trying to give people because of Maine Memory Network, it was speaking more to the access part. But when Maine Memory started, we would go and we did a couple what we called scan-a-thons, and we had no roadmap. We just kind of figured it out as we went along. But I used some of that experience to contribute to the group as they were developing the project. And we also referred to the Mass Roadshow, which was happening or happened before we actually went out on the road and did some of our gathering of stories and scanning and things like that. And then, the more recent gathering of stories and artifacts and collections is the My Maine Stories project that Maine Historical Society does. And that was, we would, sometimes it's just a one-off kind of thing. Other times we would, I know we organized something at the paper mill or at the paper mill museum. And that was where they brought in people who used to work at the paper mills, and we had basically an iPad, and we had to invest in an external microphone that they clipped on them. And then we had to have an interviewer and, so we wanted to be good. So, and we just kind of filtered people in. But then for us, the big thing was sharing it, so it was all accessible and not just sitting on our server somewhere that nobody can access. So to me, that's what I've pulled away from all this. And I believe ROPA talks about that too. That was what I was interviewed for that. It was, how do you, once you've collected this stuff, what do you do with it? So, there are many options, but I always say, make it as accessible as possible. And then you can really share it. Otherwise, it's kind of locked down. And like, all the interviews on cassette tapes, they're really not accessible now. So, we don't want to end up like that. So I guess
Thank you.
All I have to say. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. It's great to see you. I miss those creative days. I should also mention that while I think so many of you were doing virtual collecting, we were actually doing virtual collaboration to create ROPA as a tool for doing in-person events that we couldn't even imagine might not happen in the future. So there was a lot of irony going on, but there also was, just to be honest, reflecting on that time, I was so grateful to have this project as something, a creative project, a focus, something to focus on. at a challenging time when we were all so isolated. So we're forever bonded.
It was good. Right.
Yeah, so I just want to sort of, you guys can pull ROPA up on your own if you'd like. But I'm going to have it, I'm sharing my screen here. So you can see it, and the URL is here, ropa.umb.edu. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it yet, but I just want to orient you to how it's structured here. We've got a landing page, and it sort of just shows you what's in ROPA. I said there were 3 main sections, but there are actually 4. The first is all about getting started, how to use the roadmap, how to build a team and make a timeline. And the other 3 are those sort of main components, main sections that I mentioned earlier, the sort of larger chunks or pieces of the work. And then, so what would I say here? That ROPA is designed for teams of professionals and community members to work together. So a lot of, like, in terms of the who that we're talking to, it's not just an individual archivist or librarian or community member, but it's all sort of predicated on the idea of building a project team where you have leaders or coordinators in these 3 main areas: community, event, and collection. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the micro of that, but let me just show you, dive into at least one module and how it's structured. Each module has a main question, a short introduction, an introductory video, a list of roles. And then the meat of each module is really these steps to success that you need to do before, during, and after an event. And each module also features some best practice examples. I'm going to be talking about some of those going forward today. And then there's a list of resources and a glossary of terms. The full glossary can also be accessed under this big tab up here after we answer what is participatory archiving. This is a longer version of the definition I provided earlier. And then here we've got the full glossary. And then you can go back up to the icon and get to the main homepage. But so back to a module before the event has a list of steps, for example, under each area. So that's kind of how ROPA is built. I mean, the idea being that if you already know, have a sense of your community and how to build it and what stories you're going to tell and how to do the outreach, but you don't know how to process a collection, you can get guidance from these modules, but you don't have to even be bothered with the others. Hopefully this is working for people in that it's providing people with giving them the specific information that they need about various topics. I'm going to now just go back to my presentation and look a little bit at this. So I know that you all have started. I talked to Jill and she mentioned that you are already thinking about communities that you want to work with to plan an event and a collection. And so I wondered if you want to share some of those in the chat. I see a question here. How am I measuring the use of the roadmap? Great question, Sally. We haven't really even made a plan for that yet. We have a lot going on and are just still sort of, I would say, in the early phases of even rolling it out. But right now we're asking people to informally be in touch with us if they're using it, so that we can begin to identify who is using it and what for, and then make a plan going forward. So if you have thoughts and suggestions about that, I really would welcome them, because we aren't there yet, but we really want to be. We talk a lot about a sort of a 2.0 project in which we would build and support a community of practitioners. And I'd love to learn more, maybe when we get to the discussion period, about how all of you have been supporting each other, because it sounds like you've been doing that, a nice job with that, also through COVID and beyond. So can we maybe bookmark that for later, and people can feel free to share communities that you're considering working with. I see Jill is interested in working with an immigrant or origin students at your university. Any groups, or just any and all immigrant stories?
I will tell you that I have not defined that at this point.
Okay.
But we could say, yes, any. I wouldn't artificially limit it, but I think that I would have to learn more. I would have to take some steps before I could limit it more or target it more specifically, right?
Yeah, great. And then I see Franco-American studies. What do you mean by that, Anna?
Yeah, so my archive is of the Franco-American community, so folks descended from French Canadians here in Maine. And I've just noticed lately we have a lot of local Franco-American authors. And so I thought it might be cool to record stories with storytellers.
Nice. Thanks, Anna. You mentioned that, Jill, you said you're still working on defining like what you would mean by that. One helpful tool that we developed for ROPA is the Defining Community Questionnaire, which is in the Defining Community module, which I started to use for the Roadshow, which I didn't really have this method before, but I'm using it now with our community partners to help them think about who their community members are, and to think more clearly about both being inclusive, but also being as specific, both being broad to be so that you can include anybody who would belong, but also that you can do the work, the thoughtful work of being as specific as you can so that you can actually reach out to the members of that broad community. So that would be something I'd offer as a suggestion and as a tool within ROPA. Are there other groups that people have identified or that they're thinking of working with? Are there people who are interested in events, sort of like Roadshow-like events that are focused on a whole community, i.e. a town? Is that a unit that you think of working with, or an entire university or college? Yes or no? Can you put yes or no in the chat? Because I can't hear. Yes, an entire town. Yes, a college. Yeah, great. So the Bangor community, right? So I'm hoping that tool, the Defining Community Questionnaire, can help you articulate the communities you have in mind. And then I guess I'd also ask, feel free if you haven't yet spoken up about your community, but if we could now maybe think about stories, because that's another way in. It's into defining your goals. And I like to say that on the one hand, you're thinking about the who, right? Defining the community. Who are you hoping will come to this event? And the what stories, what types of items are you hoping they'll bring? And as you articulate the purpose of your event and start to do publicity and all of that, you're really thinking about both things. It's the who and the what. So are there particular topics or themes or types of stories, time periods, perspectives that you think, types of stories that you're aiming to collect for one reason or another? Maybe not. If you are, sorry. inside of ROPA, we've got a tool in the collecting stories module, which is similar to the defining community questionnaire, and we call it the guiding questions handout, which I think can really be a nice tool to use with a team in thinking about the stories. And here, I think, especially for those of you who are librarians and archivists, I think what's exciting about the opportunity with participatory archiving and this aspect of it, in this stage of this early stage of the work, you have a chance to, on the one hand, think about what do you have in your holdings, what do you know exists already in the local repositories to document whatever stories or topics, and what do you know that's missing, and to actually have that conversation with community members, because they might not know what exists in the ways that cultural heritage professionals know. And you also might not know what they have, and they may not know you might not know what they think should be collected. And this is an opportunity to really have an exchange and to share that authority around defining the goals and purpose of your initiative. So I'm seeing community, mill workers, yep, and Kathy mentioned working with a paper mill collection that I know is in the Maine Memory Network, My Maine Stories collection.
Yeah, we've also done, we worked with veterans. We had set up a thing at a library where the veterans, we sort of told them about how to do the story, and they went home and then wrote them and sent in written ones in that case. And, you know, there were various other groups, immigrants at USM, we gathered a bunch of students together and did that kind of thing. So I think part of it is staying focused and having them tell the story of the topic you want, as opposed to they're going to sit down for 2 hours and tell their life story, because it depends what you want. But sometimes we find that's a little daunting to people.
What's a little daunting? Just the open-ended.
The open-ended, you know, tell us everything about your life, and then you're there forever, and they don't know. They kind of go all over the place. But if that's what you want to capture, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think that hits on a really an issue that we definitely find is challenging inside of the Roadshow framework, because we're sort of intentionally open-ended. People can bring anything they want. They can say whatever they want about it. It's very and then in terms of like video interviews, we have them telling the quote unquote stories behind the photographs. So that often can structure a narrative, but people who come without photographs, yeah, as you're saying, Kathy, they kind of just go off and start rambling about whatever.
No, I mean, if that's the goal of the event, that's great. Ours is usually really focused because we haven't had a good time just saying, come in and tell your story. It's more, do you have a story about X? And then that kind of prompts people to come in. So either way.
Yeah, and so that's what I think is really important when you're doing the planning as your team, is to sort of make those decisions early on. Like what are you looking for and why, so that you can all the paperwork and the way you actually operate at the event can help you achieve that. So I'm looking here, collecting recollections of the moon landing. That's interesting. Yeah, who would be the audience for that? I mean, how would you define that community, Candace and Greta?
Well, we actually have another organization in town, the Challenger Learning Center of Maine, who wants to work with some of the older veterans at the Coal Land Transportation Museum here in Bangor. They're hoping to get it done this past year using our Maine Contemporary Archives audio collection kit. It just didn't get pulled together. They're still hoping to do that. Since it was an anniversary of the moon landing, again, this is when they were hoping to do it. that, they could gather together some of these folks and collect stories about what they thought of what was going on at the time with the moon landing. And then, years later, what they think about, still space travel or what's going on now. So it was actually supporting another organization to help collect stories that we would help preserve and in our website.
Great. That's really great. And anniversaries, as I'm sure you all know, can be a great opportunities for these kinds of initiatives. And Jill's got a colleague working on drag performers and LGBTQ veterans, and collecting anecdotes of city life in Portland. Is that focused just on Portland? Yes, maybe. And for first-gen college students, we might ask, how did you get here? What's your story of coming to the university, or what? I'd like to use questions that are open-ended, like tell us about your connection to the university. And then it gives them a chance to tell like how they got there, or they might want to just talk about their class. But yeah. Okay, I'm gonna, so it's 1:15. I want to just sort of talk a little bit about each of the three main sections and some of the resources that we have, and give us more time for conversation. Sorry. Whoops, sorry. So the community modules, as I've just said, are great resources in helping you to get started and to refine your thinking about how to be both inclusive of all community members and also specific and clear about the scope of the items that you look to collect. So a lot of the resources in those 4 modules have to do with that. I talked about the handouts and how they can be used by team members as you work together to clarify event and collection goals. Sorry. We also have a module called Ensuring Inclusiveness, which is all really about sort of establishing a foundation of building trust and relationships among everyone involved, so that everybody in a community feels valued and included. And it identifies some steps that all project team members can take to understand their own cultural backgrounds, as well as be open to valuing and exploring cultural perspectives that are different from their own. And the module draws on the principles of contemporary, what we call cultural competence training, to create a framework for planning a truly inclusive participatory archiving event and collection. And we work with our colleague, Michelle Villagran, from San Jose State, on that module in particular. And so just to kind of give a best practice example on what I'm talking about, when we worked with the Chinese Historical Society of New England on a roadshow a number of years ago, our partners took specific steps to set goals in how they're going to name the event that they were going to produce in partnership with our team. And initially they proposed that this would be a Chinese immigration Mass Memories Roadshow, but eventually they renamed it the Chinese American Experiences Mass Memories Roadshow, which allowed them and us to make explicit the goal of welcoming anybody who had a Chinese connection at all. So the children and grandchildren of Chinese immigrants, recent adoptees, and international students, as well as full-time residents of Chinatown. We talked about the community questionnaire. One of the best practice examples in this module highlights the work we did on the hip hop roadshow, where we had money from the NEH to hire Cindy Diggs, who is a peace activist and a community organizer. We hired her to serve as our outreach coordinator for this event. And she is a leader in Boston's hip hop scene and has many personal connections to the many diverse subgroups that exist within the hip hop community. So men and women, young and old, performers and artists from the 80s and beyond, as well as producers, social and racial justice activists, and educators, not to mention the whole younger set. And we relied on her relationships to help identify community members connected to all four elements of hip hop culture: dance, DJs, rap, and graffiti. And it was really important to pay her for that community role. So there's more material about that in the community module. So we also have in engaging participants module it's a number of resources for templates and sample flyers and press releases that you can use to just as inspiration to design your own materials, give you a sense of like the kind of information to include. We also have a contact spreadsheet template that we find that project teams can use to just log who are the people and the organizations that they're going to be outreaching to, and who's going to be the contact and how to manage all of that. So the event modules in ROPA explain how to organize a successful event using multiple stations, a welcome station to record permissions and gather contact information, an information station to gather information about items, and a copying station to create archival quality copies of items. These modules provide details about documentation, copyright, equipment, and general logistics you'll need to address when you're doing this. And so for those of you who have been mostly doing virtual collecting, I think you'll find this useful because we've got like everything is all laid out for you. There are sample floor plans, checklists, equipment checklists for each station, also sample paperwork that you can use and adapt for your own event. And I'm going to not delve into every best practice example, given that I want to allow a lot of room for time for questions and discussion. But that is basically what you're going to find in the coordinating logistics module. Everything you need to run those three stations. If you want to have other stations, like a video interview station or anything else, you can build your own off of what we've got there in terms of templates for what we consider to be the three sort of main stations. Jill mentioned that you guys are experts at copyright, so I'm not going to say anything really about that, but for any colleagues you have who are less comfortable with copyright, or if you have contributors who have questions about copyright and what's happening, we have even a handout of copyright at your event, a handout that you can have at the event to answer questions. I mentioned for the roadshow that we highlight the contributor's voice. And we allow contributors to write everything in their own words, describe their items in their own words. That's not the only way to do it, of course. And there are two really good examples of other approaches in the best practice examples for describing items. One is the Cultural Transit Program in New York generates descriptions more as a collaboration between staffs members and community members. And History Harvest, as I mentioned before, is a student-based teaching type of a participatory archiving program where there's information is gathered by students, but then from community members, but then students have the experience of either doing additional research or creating narratives based on descriptions that the community members provide. So those are just different riffs on that type of issue about description, but like everything else, you're going to want to think that through as to what you want at your event and what your priorities are for the collection. There's a lot of information about copying at stations, a lot of workflows, all that also in ROPA. And then finally, our last section is all about collection building. I noticed in the poll that a lot of you have experience with digital collections. That's great, because if you do, then you're really in a strong position to be able to create a digital collection at a participatory archiving event. We've got the collection modules of ROPA explain how to establish an accessible online home for a new collection and how to safeguard it for the future. And the section also covers approaches to publicizing a new collection and interpreting it for your community and the general public. These modules are much more technical than the other modules. After a participatory archiving event, you're going to have a digital collection, and it's important to begin planning early for how you're going to make it available online, whether through a repository platform that you host and manage, or one that's run by an organizational partner, or one that's overseen by another regional or statewide entity. And we've got a lot of guidance in these modules that kind of walk you through the options that you can choose to figure out your online repository, as well as options that you can choose for preserving your collection, whether it's selecting preservation platforms that meet your needs and budget, and selecting installing tools to aid digital preservation activities and carrying out this work for developing plans for long-term digital stewardship. We did our very, very best to make that as simple as we could. Our graduate students and undergraduate students have kind of vetted them and say that it's all working. But again, to the question that was raised earlier about evaluation, we'd love to know anyone who actually uses this. Please let us know, and whether it's useful or not. And then finally, we have a module on sharing the collection, which provides a lot of suggestions about outreach and interpretation, including physical exhibits, blog posts, and other ways to promote and interpret the collection. Our best practice examples feature some examples, and there's a whole long list of options also in the steps. I want to encourage everybody to bring this conversation back to your institution. Think about who could be project team members. For example, if you are collections people, who could you partner with? Who could take over the community work? Could be a community coordinator, and who could be a logistics coordinator, either inside or outside of your institution. And think about getting in touch with those people that you can identify in your community and involve those community members from the very beginning. You want to build a team with a diverse array of expertise and not try to do everything by yourself. I mean, it takes a village is like such an old phrase, but participatory archiving really is a collaborative thing. It's part of why it's so meaningful, I think, but it is also why it takes a certain amount of planning and intentionality and thought as to who's going to do what and how you're going to work together. At the end of the day, it's all about word of mouth. The outreach, the collection you build is directly going to reflect the participation of who comes. So the work of outreach and publicity is not for the faint of heart. It's really for certain kinds of people who are really, I would call them outreachy. And so finding someone's who really will work with you to do that is really important. And follow through. If you use ROPA, please let us know. I want to give you, we have another 30 minutes. So I didn't mean to rush through all that, but I think a lot of ROPA is best just explored on your own. And I don't want to just talk and describe it for you. In the time we have left, I think it would be, I hope it will be helpful. Take a few minutes to write down some steps that you would take to get started. Identify some people inside your organization and out who you could collaborate with to launch your project. Just make some notes that can, so that when you come away from this today, you'll have some action items for yourself. And then I thought we could just talk about ROPA, your plans, answer questions for each other as to what might be some stumbling blocks you're afraid of, and identify some ways to overcome them.
I just wanted to add that, hopefully when people organize it, they think about how they're going to share this stuff. So Maine Memory is always a source, probably Portland Public Library. There's also the Digital Commons at the state, that kind of thing. So, look, if you don't have a website of your own that can handle the gathering of stories or the photos or whatever you're gathering, please reach out to any of us, and I'm sure we can probably help you with that.
Thanks, Kathy. Is there anybody else in this group who's connected to those larger entities that you just mentioned? And does everybody, I'm hoping that people have a sense of the digital landscape that exists already in Maine.
I think that at this point I'm going to stop the recording, and sometimes that gets people talking. So before I do, I just want to say one more time, thank you so much, Carolyn. This has been a wonderful presentation.